Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, with a presentation that will focus on the way in which the Nazis dealt with political opposition as soon as they had gained power in 1933. And you will see a mixture of force and quasi-legality. Now, in the wake of the Enabling Act, attacks on the Social Democrats increased. Arrests, beatings and murders, the occupation of their offices, the banning of their newspapers, all increased, and the trade union movement was included too. The government declared May the 1st, 1933, the Day of National Labour, a public holiday. In Berlin and other towns and cities, workers marched through the streets in parades, organised by the Nazis. The parades were headed by brass bands of the SA, playing patriotic songs, as well as the Horst Wessel song. At the mass air open meetings, they listened to speeches. Across Germany, some 10 million people participated. At the Tempelhof field, an airfield in Berlin, 500,000 people listened to Hitler promise an end to unemployment in a speech that was broadcast on the radio. The perimeter of the field was decked with Nazi flags, and searchlights were thrown on Nazi banners. A firework display ended things. The next day, the Nazis stormed into every trade union office in the country and took them over. They also took over all trade union newspapers and periodicals, and the trade union bank. Leaders of the movement were arrested and sent to the concentration camps. An independent trade union movement was no more. On May the 10th, all property and any other assets owned by the Social Democrats was confiscated by court order. On June the 21st, the party was all but banned. Social Democrat deputies were no longer allowed to take up their places in any legislature in Germany. All Social Democrat meetings were banned, as were all its publications. No member of the party could hold any kind of public office, nor be allowed employment in the civil service. If it was technically legal, that past office holders were sought out, beaten and often murdered, certainly not. The formal ban came on July the 14th. So, the Communist Party was no more, and the Social Democrat Party was no more. The Nazis next turned their attention on the Centre Party, the third consistently successful party of the Weimar period, and the one with a rock-solid Catholic support base. This last factor meant that the Nazis would not be able to apply such a brutal approach in destroying it. But the Centre Party had moved towards the Nazi position, and its fight against the godless left. If the Nazis were to deliver a concordat with the Pope, then the Catholic community could live with a government that also stood opposed to the liberalism of Weimar's culture. The Catholic bishops issued a statement in May, and we are still in 1933 by the way, declaring their support for the Nazi-led government, and clamped down themselves on priests who voiced criticism of the regime. Taking their lead from the bishops, other Catholic organisations lent their support to the government, and the Centre Party's leader, the prelate Monsignor Ludwig Kaas, went to the Vatican to draft the Concordat. While in Rome, he resigned, and Heinrich Brüning, the former Chancellor and himself a staunch authoritarian at heart, took over again. Meanwhile, the Nazis were applying the same kind of pressure, if not with the same brutality, to the Centre Party's organisation, as well as to individuals, as had been done to the Communists and Social Democrats, despite the Concordat. Its regional and local organisation was being closed down. The Catholic trade union movement too. Sympathetic newspapers were banned. Centre Party state ministers were being removed, and party members in the civil service were threatened with dismissal. Catholic politicians, lawyers and journalists were being arrested. At the end of June, both Reichstag and state delegates of the Bavarian People's Party, the Centre Party's close ally, were taken into protective custody. Still, a concordat was reached. It included a ban on priests engaging in political activity. The Bavarian People's Party formally dissolved itself on July the 4th. Both at state and national level, Centre Party delegates began resigning their seats or transferring to the Nazi Party. City councillors did the same. The party formally dissolved itself on July the 5th, telling their elected representatives at whatever level to approach the Nazi Party if they wanted to continue as elected representatives. The Nazi Party preferred them to resign. So it was that the Centre Party, the party that had had loyal support throughout Weimar's history, destroyed itself and left those supporters without the representation they had voted for. The one-party state was almost a reality for the liberal parties that had once commanded a significant level of support were now of no consequence. The Democratic Party, now State Party, only had 5 seats when it had 75 with almost 19% of the vote in 1919. The People's Party 2 seats when it had 65 with almost 14% of the vote in 1920. Both parties had voted for the Enabling Act. The State Party had stood on the Social Democrats' list in the 1933 election, and this was enough for the Nazis to have their delegates stripped of their seats. It hardly mattered, for on June the 28th the party dissolved itself. As for the People's Party, they had drifted increasingly to the right following Streseman's death in 1929, and were really a party with an identity crisis. They too gave up the ghost and dissolved themselves on July the 4th. The Nationalist People's Party still had 52 seats from 8% of the vote, and of course was a coalition member. But in 1924 it had had over 100 seats with over 20% of the vote, and membership of the coalition had left it demoralised. They had entered the coalition confident that they would be in charge. The Nazis were, after all, inexperienced, but the Nazi leadership had shown themselves to be masters of their own destiny and completely outmanoeuvred the nationalists. The Enabling Act was the death of them. From April onwards, they too became victims of the kind of illegal pressure that they had been a party to, by a government they were a member of. Hugenberg found himself under pressure too. He threatened to resign, thinking it would invalidate the Enabling Act, as it had given power only to the present government. But he found that the Nazis weren't bothered by any such legalities. The pressure continued until Hugenberg did resign at the end of June. The remaining party leaders agreed to dissolve the party. To underline what had happened, on July the 14th, a decree declared the National Socialist German Workers' Party constitutes the only political party in Germany. Germany was officially a one-party state. So, we have a one-party state in Germany. Boy, the Nazis moved incredibly quickly. And don't forget, you need to think of legal methods, the use of force, Hitler's charismatic leadership, and propaganda. What was the Concordat? Now, I made this plea in the presentation that looked at the Nazification of the state, but there's no harm in doing so again. Do please give this a thumbs up if you found it useful, and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, and please do tell your friends about it too. Spread the word for me. Thank you so much for listening, and the very best of luck with your studies. Cheers.